We're breaking down the Bills' free agent moves with one of my favorite people to talk football with today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. I am joined today by Anthony Prohaska of Cover One. He hosts the Disguise Coverage podcast, co-hosts The Film Room. And folks, you got to check out The Film Room. They recently had incredible episodes with Terrell Bernard and Michael Hoecht that you should not miss. And look, I wanted to bring in an outside voice to get some perspective on the Bills' free agency moves. And I wanted to make sure that I brought in someone who not only knows the Bills and their schemes, but has taken the time to study the film of the players that were brought in, was not interested in talking to someone and getting their vibes analysis, right? Too much vibes analysis out there. I want to talk about the tape and what these players actually are. That leads me to Anthony Prohaska. Welcome in, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I promise to limit the vibes as much as possible and just keep to the tape and the evaluation. I second that notion so much. So much was like, yeah, I'm getting this kind of vibe when I watch this guy. I'm like, that doesn't count. So I appreciate that.
If they watch, I think what they do is they look at the age, the stats, and then just, how does that make me feel? Right.
Yeah.
So
I think you might get a couple let me search the guy's name on Twitter or put him into YouTube. I think it's similar to a lot of prospect evaluation, for the draft, let me type this guy's name into YouTube. Oh, somebody put together a 3-minute and 32-second highlight clip. All right, boom. I know what this guy's all about.
Well, we are going to get into it today. I've certainly shared all the thoughts I possibly can about all these players. And so wanted to get your takes here today. Still battling allergies, folks. So that's why the voice sounds like it does. And the tone is like it is. I don't have the ability to really project, but I'm grateful for Anthony to be here, not only for his insight, but to help me out here and not have to speak the entire show. So, Anthony, let's get into it. Let's start with the biggest moves that the Bills have made, which have come along the defensive front seven: Joey Bosa, Michael Hoecht, Larry Ogunjobi. Let's start with Bosa. You studied this player, obviously has been a storied player in the NFL. What do you think is left in the tank here, and what type of impact do you think we can expect out of Bosa?
I think he's got a good amount left in the tank. It's just a matter of if he'll be healthy enough to use what's left in the tank like that. He's got good stuff in the tank. I question how healthy the tank is, if that makes sense. And I don't think that's a novel thought or concept to me. Even last year, him playing, like he said in his presser, 60 to 70%. You saw that on the tape, the 2024 tape. He looked to me like a dude who was laboring, who was hurt. And again, makes sense. The hand, the hip, back injuries, it limited his flexibility. And he's not the most flexible or fluid guy to begin with. I think, what he can do for this defense, I also want to pair it a little bit with what Von Miller did. I liked what Von did. I didn't think he was going to be, I don't think he was washed or should be written off before the season. I didn't think he was as amazing as some make him out to be in the year. I thought he was largely productive, like a high end 3 to a mid to low tier edge 2 at times. I think Bosa, if he's healthy, can eclipse that or play to the best level of that. I think he can be that mercenary pass rusher in a rotational role, playing off of Rousseau and Hoyt and Epinesa as your main, first, early down, 2 down type of players. Bosa can play the run. It's just, do you really want him doing that given the health concerns? How much do you have to flex him into there? Maybe they do a little bit now with the PED suspension to Hoyt. We'll see. But the way he fits, and if he can stay healthy, power rusher, fits with what the Bills are trying to do from a pocket compression standpoint. I like his ability to slide blockers off of his frame via good hand usage and he's got like upper body fluidity in close quarters. He knows how to create rush angles and attack offensive tackle sets with hesitation moves and footwork to kind of put them into disadvantageous or awkward positions. And I really like how he understands rush angles and quarterback drops. Vaughn from time to time would kind of get pushed around that arc as he'd run it. You don't see that too much with Bosa, mainly because of his style, his build, but also how he attacks. I do think it can be a good fit. It all just comes down to, like you've noted, like so many have noted, how healthy can he stay? But if he is, I think this is a really, I think there is some upside here to this signing.
Yeah, he's not ancient, right? I mean, he turns 30 over the summer, and I guess he played 14 games last year, which is the most he's done in a while. And I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I thought his best game might have been the playoff game against Houston, which I think gives me a lot of like hope for where he's headed. And you listen to his press conference, he's not lacking any confidence, but he also kind of suggested that 60 to 70%, and then just kind of getting a little bit more and more every week. And then by the end of the season, he kind of felt like himself. I thought that really lined up with where his best moments came, which I thought were against Houston in that playoff game. And so let's hope that the Bills can get some of that in the postseason this year. Yeah. Boy knows that's been kind of the issue here with this team in the playoffs. Yeah. So Bosa, that's the big ticket guy, but the guy they signed to like a long-term deal on defense was Michael Hoecht, a 3-year deal. Obviously it's not off to a great start. The expansion, nobody is excited about that, but after 6 games, he'll have a full opportunity to show what he brings to the table. And that's a really unique player that could do a lot of different things. And I even think with Bosa to an extent, watching him play 3-4 outside linebacker basically for the Chargers is like, yep, that's going to be different in Buffalo. And I think you watch Hoyt and, you really haven't seen the Bills utilize a player like this. So how do you think Hoyt fits into this mix for the Bills defensive front seven?
My first thought with it is very hopeful from a schematic perspective. Just he was a free agent target for me. I'm a big fan of Kobe Turner, and then Jared Verse was crushing it. And I also like Cam Kitchens coming out of Miami. So I found myself watching a decent amount of Rams tape in season. I watched about 6 to 8 games of Rams tape on the all 22 throughout the year. And Hoyt just kept flashing. I kept seeing 97 flash, but it was from all these different spots. Like one game I'd see him flash a bunch off the edge. Then he's flashing like as an off ball linebacker. And then he's like lined up in the A gap. And that caused me to kind of dive into him in season a bit. And I'm very hopeful for what he could bring schematically to the Bills defense. I would like to see, I know they're not going to change their stripes, but I would like some more front multiplicity. I would like more simulated pressures, more creepers, more 5-man pressures, just more variability up front. And when you look at how Hoyt succeeded with the Rams, that third down package or their rush package, he referred to it as they called it their cheetah package in LA. And he played the spinner role that he called it. It would be him lined up on the same side with Verse, and on the other side it was Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, and Byron Young. I know the Bills don't necessarily have those horses up front, but I would like to see more schematic variability. And in order to have more schematic variability, I think you need to have players that can operate in variable roles. And I think Hoyt is a move towards that. Even if they don't do that, he just kind of stays is more of a 4-down edge rusher like the Bills have done. His size, his athleticism, the violence, the hand usage, his run defensibility, but even then some of the hand technique, he's got a really good cross chop. He's got the ability to clear some hands and add some things as a rusher off the edge. But overall, I continue to classify him as just dirt, sandpaper, and violence. And I think the Bills, even if it's just an edge, can welcome that into their defense. I think they need more of it. I'm really excited for what he could mean schematically in terms of, like what a chess piece he could be. Now, he's not Micah Parsons level chess piece, but he does give you some options in terms of how you can game up protections and get creative pre to post snap.
I'm excited to have a schematic variability conversation with you at some point. We'll have to hook up for that. Let's get through the draft, kind of get a full picture of what, this team can be. And we'll have to hook up over the summer to kind of get into some of that, because I think even with these moves already, there's some possibilities that exist.
Yeah.
I hope you didn't bring in Michael Hoyt to not tap into the versatility. So we'll have to get back together this summer to get into some of that. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk Josh Palmer and Larry Ogunjobi. Folks, be sure to stick with us. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like being at the game in person. Getting tickets should not be stressful, and that's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks is the easiest way to find and buy tickets to live events. The curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, and theater events. Plus, you have peace of mind. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and the lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On, spelled out, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we are talking with Anthony Prohaska of Cover One about the Bills free agent class. And next up, I'd like to get into Larry Ogunjobi, unique addition to this team, another guy that comes from a 3-4 defense, but certainly probably played his best football in those even fronts with Cleveland and Cincinnati. How do you see him fitting into this picture, obviously, after he's done with his suspension?
I think it starts with that conversation of what he was in Cleveland and Cincinnati versus what he was in Pittsburgh the past 3 years. And, I know you've noted this as well, just the past couple of years in Pittsburgh being more of a 3-4 defensive end. So he's kind of playing more in a 4 and a 4-eye. I do think him coming back to a 4-down front like the Bills have and playing more traditionally inside suits his skill set that much more. I think in an ideal world, I think he's suited more to be a 3-tech, just given his size and frame and skill set. I do think the Bills will use him at a 1-tech. I know I've spoken about this on shows and on social. I know so many fans want more of a traditional plugger at one, at a 1-tech. They want Tavondre Sweat, or they want these guys that are just space eaters and pluggers. And I understand that. And I echo some of that sentiment to a degree. But the Bills don't necessarily operate in that vein. And given Ogunjobi's skill set and what the interior is really starting to look like, I see him kind of operating in both roles, but I do think his skill set and size and everything skews more towards that 3-tech type of role, upfield, penetration, chaos creator. He's got some pocket compression, mixed with penetration as a rusher. I like his hand usage, very active, keeps himself clean, and then uses his hands to work and move through different move transitions as a rusher. He's good at penetrating zone runs, especially from the backside. You'll watch him cut off, that backside run and be able to just shoot a gap. And I also think how he plays with that athleticism that he has inside, which kind of surprised me to a degree, like watching him flush Bo Nix from the pocket last year and actually run him down. And it's not like, oh, look at him giving chase. It's like, no, he's a threat to kind of catch up to a good mobile QB like Bo Nix. That athleticism inside, I think, pairs really well with what the Bills want to do. And I think also having him be as more of a 3-tech or even a 1 at times, having him matched up versus guards and centers as opposed to tackles and guards, guys that are going to, in theory, he should be quicker than and be able to move against better from an arm length perspective. The one concern I do have that I don't think this move necessarily addresses is just more of the displacement issues on the interior. I think, double teams can get under him. You will see him get displaced vertically, even horizontally from time to time. He'll get caught playing high every once in a while, but I think he's able to withstand a bit of that just with his upfield penetration and block recognition. But I think this is another move in the bag for the Bills of, they want guys, again, upfield penetrators. It's not necessarily about anchoring versus the double team or dropping the knee, but if you can split and just gum up the whole works, they'll take you and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and I showed this in some of my film breakdowns that I did for the Herd Mentality Substack. I mean, he's going to be playing so much closer to the ball, and he's playing, like you said, 4-4-eye, sometimes even a 5-tech in Pittsburgh, and not only playing in wider alignments, but in more of a gap control style where it's like, hey, just 2-gap lock peak shed where, okay, now you're playing closer to the ball, you're playing more up the field, and I think that'll unlock a bit more of what Ogunjobi has to offer. Absolutely. Now, obviously, both of these guys, Hoecht, Ogunjobi, they're going to be suspended for 6 games. What are your general thoughts on just how the Bills navigate getting ready for a season, right, and then not having them, and then having them? Like, how do you think they can deal with that?
Oh, it's so frustrating to even have this conversation, just given the needs that they already had up front. I think, the interior, I think, is still the priority. I'm not completely, I will never write off a player after a rookie season. And I think you need those first full 3 years to kind of really make a solid judgment and evaluation. But I did think even with the Ogunjobi signing, if there was no suspension, I do think they still need another body on the interior just because I'm not holistically confident in what Dwayne Carter is, just with what his season was last year as, minimal pass rush productivity, but then all the issues against the run that we saw on tape at Duke, like, being able to withstand doubles and play against the run wasn't a strong suit at Duke. And I think that carried over into the league, but then also not seeing the pass rush element as well was concerning. And now with Ogunjobi being suspended for a bit, I think it still keeps defensive tackle potentially on the menu at pick 30 in the draft, or maybe, you're looking at another body in free agency potentially. We had the move with Matt Milano today. Maybe they're looking at somebody else in some way, shape, or form. But I think defensive tackle on the interior still needs to be a focus for you on, early in this draft potentially. And even if Ogunjobi crushes it, it's still a 1-year deal. So in theory, you're going to be back at this same starting point again next year. So I think it just kind of ticks it up a little bit more in terms of importance on the interior. Edge, I think, is a similar conversation with Hoecht being out. What are you going to get from Bosa? So if Bosa goes down, do you need more of an edge 3 or an edge 4? Do what type of value do you need at that spot? And then that pairs with my thought of already existing with Bosa, where if he continues to have injury concerns, he's probably not coming back to Buffalo. If he stays healthy and crushes it, he probably cashes in and is also not coming back to Buffalo. So I feel like this is a 1-year rental. So you still need to address the edge grouping, even if Bosa's healthy and good, because again, next year, odds are you're still looking to address edge again. Yep. So I think with Hoecht and Ogunjobi just kind of dials both of those up a little bit. I think if the board falls to you right in the draft, given how deep the edge and especially the interior classes in the draft, you look to add a body there if the board falls right on day 1 or on day 2, or at the very least, early in day 3 with the round 4 picks. I think this is a group that could use some auxiliary pieces this year, even if everybody was good with the suspension standpoint. But then given those, I think you ratchet it up a little bit and also have a little bit of an eye towards the future.
Yeah, we see that similarly. I mean, the Bills need some cost-controlled options for this defensive line where, beyond this season, the only edges that you have under contract are Hoecht, Rousseau, and Solomon. The only players on the inside that you have under contract are Oliver and Dwayne Carter. So, like you said, even if these suspensions didn't happen, I think you still needed to add some players. And I think the way to do that is the draft, because they need some cost-controlled options here that can stick around and give the Bills some value to go with some of the players that are becoming more and more expensive. Absolutely. All right, we'll come back to the defense, but I want to get to Josh Palmer. I think he was both on our radars, going into the free agency period. The Bills land him. I want to kind of frame the question like this. How does the arrival or with Josh Palmer now in Buffalo, what does he add to this Bills offensive menu?
Oh, I think he gives you someone who can do some of the true one-on-one outside, some of the true X stuff that you're looking for. He's got a good release package for somebody who's not the most sudden or explosive type of player. He's got some suddenness to his game in his releases, and he's got a varied menu. I think his releases are where the Keenan Allen influence shows up of playing with somebody like that for all those years. And Allen had one of the best, him and Devontae Adams for me were like the top 2 release package guys in the league for so long. So you got a guy who can get off the line in a very amount of ways, especially if you guys are trying to press him and get up in his kitchen, like he's comfortable with that. And I think it's the release package work and then the separation ability, particularly in the underneath and the intermediate. This is a guy with good size, at 6'1", about 210 pounds. He's got good arm length. So he's in the upper percentiles, like the high 70s for, weight and arm length. I think 58th percentile for height. So somebody who brings size, some athleticism, but precision in his route running and the ability to separate. And I think they needed that within this wide receiver group. And you're hoping you can get more separation with Keon Coleman, but you don't really know. There's some variables with him, just with the wide spectrum of outcomes you could have for him as a player. We know what Shakir is on the inside. We know what Curtis Samuel is. And then it's like, okay, where does everybody else kind of fall in within this group? Pass catchers, receivers, and tight end. I kind of just look at them as one holistic group. I think Palmer gives you a good separator in the underneath and the intermediate. He understands leverage. He understands deception. Somebody who can win downfield with deception, even though, again, he's not this burner who's just going to be flying by guys left and right. But he a little sneaky kind of fast. Like if you lose sight of him as a cloud corner or something, or even in, if you're a cover 3 corner, you're kind of peeking in the backfield. He can get behind you a little bit. And we saw that on tape last year. I think he's just another guy who is a piece to the puzzle. He adds to the menu. He adds to the basketball lineup you're trying to build at wide receiver. If you subscribe to that theory, it's really just the precision, the stem work, the release work, the deception, pacing. I think he's a professional route runner and can separate early and often at multiple points in the route.
Yeah, I think, obviously I think he's got a pretty average athletic profile. He's not a deficient athlete. He's fine. But I think that the technician that he is and his ability to kind of force those false steps, attack blind spots, he gets even and he leaves all the time, man. I mean, just the exact route running profile that this Bills outside receiving core has kind of been lacking. So excited for him to be part of the mix. All right, I'm excited to get more into this conversation with you on the other side of it. I'm curious where you're at with Darrick Forrest. I got to sneak in a question about Dane Jackson and maybe a couple of the under the radar signings as well. Folks, be sure to stick with us.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, folks, my guest today, Anthony Prohaska of Cover One, the host of Disguised Coverage, the co-host of the Film Room. Again, check out the recent episodes. Michael Hoecht on there, breaking down film, talking about everything. Terrell Bernard on there, talking about film, of course, his process. I thoroughly enjoyed both episodes. When you guys get those players on, those conversations are second to none. Absolute cannot miss content. So check them out on YouTube. Go to the Cover One Film Room, the Cover One YouTube channel. You'll be able to see all of that and the other fantastic work over at Cover One. All right, Anthony, I'm a little geeked up about Darrick Forrest.
Yeah.
All right, you're there too. Good. Like McDermott, safeties, this guy's got some upside. I know that he's going to have to kind of beat out some players, but like, what is the skill set that you saw and how do you see the path? Like, how does he get on the field and help this defense?
So as soon as the Bills signed him, he's somebody who, I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, I've been watching every Darrick Forrest rep since he came in the league, but he's somebody who I liked coming out of Cincinnati. And that draft class in 2021 was actually my first as a Cover One member. And I was really starting to dive into different things. So the first thing I did on Twitter was search my handle and Forrest. And I found a bunch of cut-ups that I had made of him in Cincinnati. I liked this game there. And that was a couple of like him and that other safety Wiggins. And then Cook came out and then Sauce and Kobe Bryant. They were like churning out some discipline.
Loaded.
Yeah, some really fun secondary dudes for several years coming out of Cincinnati. And then turning on the tape, especially that 2022 year where he had most of his snaps and the 4 interceptions. I was pleasantly surprised how well his testing athleticism and college athleticism translated to the NFL. I think so much nowadays you get people throwing out the RAS scores for guys and be like, oh, well, they're a great athlete. Look at their RAS. And it's like, that doesn't really translate on the field. You don't see that athleticism play. I thought his athleticism does. I think ideally he's best suited for more of a split field safety type of role, but he's a guy who can live in the post. I think he has the athleticism and the rate and some of the diagnosing and processing to do so and play in the post, which I think is significantly important to the Bills defense. Yep. And I also like that athleticism shows up in the box as well, along with physicality, whether he's just lined up pre-snap in the box or he's playing top down from a split field or a post safety look. He'll shed blocks from wide receivers. He'll take them on. He'll detonate on running backs if given the opportunity. And overall, I think he takes good angles to the football on the ground and in the air. Play top down, run fit from depth. I don't think he's a plus defender in man coverage, but he's versatile enough to battle versus various body types at all 3 levels. And then he's got a little bit of some anticipation, some route diagnosis. And I think it kind of, I hate using this phrase because I think it's such a knock against guys, but I think he's one of those, I think he's a jack of many trades, not necessarily a master of none. I don't think he's top tier in any one or elite in any one area, but I do think he's relatively assignment sound, skill set sound, process sound across the board. And I think he's a really intriguing piece given what he has already in him and what this coaching staff has gotten out of people at this position in prior years.
I like that formula. Like I agree. He's assignment sound. He's athletic. He's physical. He's urgent. all right, now coach up the rest, right? Like, I think that's such a really good ball of clay to hand over to Sean McDermott and company, who has just an off the charts resume of developing safeties that are not necessarily like premium investments.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I got some excitement here. And I mean, look, the safety depth has really been stressed over the last 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And so he's going to play, right? Like that. I think that there's an inevitability with the opportunity that's going to come. And then what happens when he gets out there, that'll probably define what his ultimate legacy as a Buffalo Bill is.
Yeah. And I think, and I know you've noted this, in an ideal world, I think McDermott and co, they want Rapp to be one, and then they want Bishop to be the other. Like that's what they would like. But I don't think it's a crazy thing to be like, well, maybe DeMar Hamlin wins it, or maybe Derek Forrest wins it. Like, I think Forrest is more competing for a depth safety spot. But if you told me someone else grabbed that second safety spot and it wasn't Cole Bishop, I wouldn't be completely shocked.
All right, let's have the Dane Jackson conversation, because I think there's a lot of Bills Mafia that are very annoyed by the return of Dane Jackson. I think you have some that understand that it's a depth player, and he's started nearly 30 games for this team.
Yeah.
And maybe that's exactly why people don't want him back, because they've seen him play and there's been some variance. But where are you at? Like, what's your temperature on Dane Jackson's return?
They needed bodies in the corner room. No, and I don't want to just treat him like he's just a body. They need a warm body in there.
Yeah.
But you don't bring back Rasul Douglas. You trade away Kyrie Elam. You're looking at the corner room, and it's thin, not just from like a quality standpoint, from a quantity standpoint. Like, you don't have enough bodies in the room. And Dane Jackson gives you, however you view him, I think he's more of a CB3, but he gives you a high floor guy. He's had success in this defense. I know success might have to come in quotes for a lot of people, because, everybody's just going to remember the times that he didn't make plays on the ball and he was right.
It's a Minnesota game, right? It's a Minnesota game, right? Yeah.
And, I think Amon-Ra cooked him on a route in Detroit on Thanksgiving, and people are using that as another example.
Yeah.
He's a high floor guy. He knows the system. He's good in the locker room. All these things that are not sexy, and a lot of fans probably don't want to hear, but he gives you some security at that position. He is very responsible. He knows this defense in and out. He wins with what he's got in between his ears and how smart he is. And then he does a lot of the things that they like by, from a coverage standpoint, but also from fitting the run, coming up, tackling, being assignment sound, and fitting from depth and run fitting in there. I would love to really pair him with a day one corner, or, even if it's day two, but corner is, a little peek ahead is my top priority right now, and something I'd like them to address at pick 30 in round one. So hopefully you pair him with, just some more running mates or a high end guy to go from there. But I don't think the Bills are looking at him as like, oh, we brought Dane Jackson back. CB2 is locked up.
Yeah.
They're doing it because they need a body in the room. He's a good depth guy, and he gives you a high floor.
Yeah, until they say the plan is Dane Jackson at CB2. You only got so much energy to give, man. You don't have to empty the chamber on being
People
concerned that Dane Jackson's going to start, right?
So angry.
Right. I don't know. Touch some grass, right? Would love to get into a couple of the under the radar signings. How about Laviska Shenault? Let's start there. He comes in. I think everybody loved him at Colorado. I mean, just what a fun playmaker. Now that hasn't really translated to anything in the NFL, and if anything, it's going the wrong way. Maybe there's some kick return upside here. I thought he was okay as a kick returner for Seattle last year, but then I thought at the end of the season, like, the wheels just fell off with some ball handling issues. And he got lit up by Joe Andreessen as well in that game. But yeah, that was a fun one to go back and watch and be reminded of. But Laviska Shenault, like, is there a path here? Is this Chase Claypool 2.0? What's your thought here?
I think for these guys, it's always kind of, can they tap into what they were supposed to be, the traits and the skill set. And I don't want to diss the wide receiver room, but I think there's opportunity for some competition at the low end of the wide receiver room of the depth chart, or maybe some return capability. I really do think it's more of a dart throw type of, hey, let's bring this guy in if he can offer us something cool. If not, they're not. Similar to kind of like the Dane Jackson thing, but even less so. I know some people were pretty fired up about, in a negative way, about the Laviska Shenault signing, and it's like, they're not bringing him in to be wide receiver one. He's not the guy to change the room. They're not like, oh, we're set now. Everything's good. We're done. The prince that was promised is here. I think it's just another body for competition, maybe some depth, a guy to see some snaps in the preseason. You go from there. And if maybe things finally click for him and he becomes the guy that you saw in college, or that he was, kind of built out to be early on in his career, cool. It's low risk, low reward. I don't think it's much of anything other than a guy who might flash here and there. And if not, oh well.
Yeah. I mean, worst case scenario, he's competing with like Tyrell Shavers and Jalen Virgil to be
Yes.
the wide receiver 5 that has some special teams value, that has some size. I mean, Viska went in motion a ton for Seattle last year, and that's, Jalen Virgil when he got into the games, right? He's just going in motion and being an available dump down target. Like, I don't think there's a big plan for him, but an opportunity nonetheless to bring a guy into the building and see what he can offer. I mean, obviously it's probably now or never for him, right? And if it's going to be now, like, okay, let it be for us on a minimum contract. So let's do one more here. Kendrick Green added. He's won 2 different, opening day starting opportunities for Pittsburgh and Houston. Obviously injuries kind of got away in both of those chances, actually. Still young, 26, got the wrestling background. RAS scores real good here. He's a guy that I really liked coming out of Illinois. Hasn't fully come together in the NFL for him, and I don't think the Bills have glaring needs on the interior offensive line. But I mean, what have you seen in studying Kendrick Green to this point, and what's his path?
I trust Aaron Kromer a lot, so anytime they bring in anyone to the offensive line, I'm kind of just like, okay. Like, even if it's someone who I've somehow never heard of in any way, shape, or form, I'm like, oh, there's probably a plan. And if they have anything, I trust Kromer to kind of coach him up and get as much blood out of that stone as possible. In, the limited tape that I saw from 2024, I thought, you mentioned the RAS score. I thought the athleticism really played in, especially in the short area. Like, there's some good footwork. There's some good movement ability in the short area. Between the first and second level, even climbing to the second level a little bit. I think he's got some power or explosion to his game. If he can get to the second level and get hands on you, or even, down blocking on the first or some gap scheme stuff, really ability to kind of wash some guys out. And even on zone stuff, I think the athleticism plays as well. So I think just his movement capabilities paired with the physicality, I do think he has to clean up some stuff from a pass protection standpoint. But I mean, I'm never against adding offensive line depth in any way, shape, or form, whether it's free agency, whether it's the draft, anything. You can never be too secure on your offensive line. And Kromer has shown the capability to really develop guys and set them up for success and raise some ceilings and raise some floors. And you take a guy with some good starting experience and some cool physical tools, and, on a line that doesn't need a frontline answer right now. I thought it was a cool move, and we'll kind of see what it comes to.
Yeah, and I think with, low key, Connor McGovern, David Edwards, last year of their contracts, and you have some appealing young depth players in Cedric Van Pran Granger and Alec Anderson, in addition to Tylen Grable, who got some looks at guard during training camp. And I wonder if that's part of what he's being asked to do. But the one thing that Kendrick Green does bring to the table is NFL proven versatility. He's played all the spots on the interior. And I think outside of Alec Anderson, that hasn't really been manifested in any of the depth players as well. So at a minimum, right, like competition for those players, none of those players should be comfortably penciled in, and I think that's a good spot for Kendrick Green to make an influence, but also an exposure for the Bills to a player that probably a few years ago they had a decently high grade on, and bring him in, see what he's got. Maybe he's Will Clapp for this team. Maybe he's a guy that next year has a real opportunity. So we'll see what happens with Kendrick Green. But I filed that one under interesting because I think there's a little something there that's, not just like a camp body. I think he'll have a legit chance to make some noise. We'll see what he does.
Yeah, former 3rd-round pick, 975 career snaps at center, all in that rookie year with Pittsburgh, and then 267 at left guard, 115 at right guard. Nice little movable guy in the, on the interior, and got some traits, got some pieces. We'll see what Kromer can do. I think that's interesting as well.
All right, Anthony, thank you so much for being here, man. Great conversation. I wish that I had a little bit more that I could have gotten into with you, but your insight always valued here on this podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. And anytime you need me to talk and take up the airspace so you can rest the soothing vocals, I gotcha.
Well, listen, we had this queued up last week before the voice fell out. So you are a preferred guest regardless of my vocal capacity right now. All right, folks. Thank you so much for being here and listening. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.